A special series of In Your Corner reports called Are the Children Lying?
Brad Edwards tells us about abuse of children so brutal that at first you may not want to believe it. Brad joins us now with his report.
Well, usually when you first hear the words satanic ritual abuse, it sounds almost like something made up from a horror movie. It's a practice that is so brutal, so horrifying, that you don't want to believe it's being done to young children as well as adults. I'm pretty hard to convince, but when you hear about the abuse from kids, it's difficult not to believe. Still, many in law enforcement who are asked to investigate have to ask the question, are the children lying?
And I'm going to chop up some more of you. I'm God and I've killed everybody. Oh, the devil, yeah, you could use the word devil or demons or whatever you want to call it.
You've heard about the high-profile cases, the celebrity murders by Charles Manson, the Son of Sam murder case in David Berkowitz, the Night Stalker case in California. And the case right here in Oklahoma, hundreds of murders attributed to Henry Lee Lucas.
It's supposed to be for the reincarnation of the devil.
But maybe you haven't heard that satanic ritual abuse was involved in these cases. We now know. What we also know is that ritual abuse cases are being reported all over the country. In Oklahoma alone, last year, 22 cases were confirmed. It could be happening in your own backyard.
And you'd go in the room and there were other rooms with pregnant women that were having their babies killed off. And everybody was wearing these black hoods and robes. And they'd put children in cages and treat them like animals.
Reports like this often come from children put into therapy for behavior problems. They tell similar stories of people in robes torturing them physically, sexually, and mentally. The problem is believing them. That was the problem in the McMartin daycare case in California. As many as 41 children were believed to have been satanically, ritually abused by their schoolmasters. The kids revealed stories of being led into tunnels under the school and abused. It was the longest-running trial in California history, resulting in a minor conviction. Few believed the kids until parents paid to have the daycare center excavated and found tunnels with satanic paraphernalia and animal bones, just as the kids described. It was too late to enter into the trial. The cases I've told you about so far are from around the country, but I didn't have to go far to find cases right here.
I know, it just hurts.
A family called to ask for help in getting something done about an alleged molestation case involving people in the Surrey Hills Mormon Church. That opened the door to another case allegedly involving some of the same church people, where a woman claims she and her 5 young children were caged and abused in the worst way, the satanic way.
Have you seen that done? Have you ever seen a baby killed by them?
Yes, I have.
But you don't know who belongs to or anything?
No, they've killed a lot of people's babies. But I don't know who they are.
Well, you say this couldn't be happening, and so did I. But when you see children in therapy and case after case draw pictures of what was done to them and what they were forced to do, then you stop asking the question, are the children lying? Yuzi?
Brad, besides what you mentioned, what other evidence is there to back up what these children are saying?
That's a big problem that we're going to get into in this series, because there is little hard physical evidence. Nobody can come in and lay something down and say this was used, that was done, and it's very secretive, we're told, so that makes it difficult for prosecutors to go after these cases.
Bradley, how widespread is it, and why don't we hear more about it?
Well, I've studied cases from all over the country, independent of each other, yet still describing the same kind of ritual abuse, like some kind of a regular ceremony used elsewhere in the country. We don't hear more about it because it is so unbelievable. And police, when they investigate child abuse cases, they hesitate to bring up those words satanic ritual because it's so unbelievable. Yeah. They fear prosecutors DAs will not even take the case.
Okay, and part 2 tomorrow night at 10?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Brad. We'll be right back with your weather outlook.
Stay with us.
This is Derrick Broze. This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Standing Rock.
That man is wanted in 5 different countries: Chile, Argentina, Brazil.
We've been fighting a long time. We've all lost so very much. So many loved ones gone.
Don't you fucking tease that horse!
You are not alone. There are pockets of resistance
All right, now you should be able to hear me. So, as I said, welcome to the episode 136 of the Conscious Resistance Live, my weekly podcast where I break down the latest information, my latest articles, and important stories that you might not be hearing in the corporate media, let alone the alternative media. And you might be wondering what that clip was, as I showed here on the screen right now. That clip I was showing is from a newscast, an investigation. It was actually a 38-minute in total video. And that was sent to me by a source who sent me a lot of good information a few years ago when I was investigating the Utah ritual abuse situation. And that report is from the early 1990s by a journalist named Brad Edwards. If you're at theconsciousresistance.com, you can scroll down and check out our various topics that we have here, and you can see Utah ritual abuse. You can click on that topic, and it'll take you here to my previous reports, and that includes the Are the Children Lying report and investigation. In fact, you can just search Are the Children Lying, and you'll see that it'll take you right to that page here, and you can see Are the Children Lying, Brad Edwards in your corner. I think it was in 1990s. He was a journalist in Oklahoma City. So I just wanted to show that. As you guys know, sometimes I play historical clips here on the show that I think are worth looking at, and I'm going to continue to do that. If you want to watch the full report on that, you can go back and check it out. Search Are the Children Lying at theconsciousresistance.com. Now, today's going to be a good show. I've got a lot to talk about. We're going to be covering two of my latest articles, one which is focused on my ongoing investigation into not only Bethany Christian Services, the Christian adoption firm, but the international adoption scene. And I'll specifically be showing how many of these adoptions, as I've been learning and reporting on now since May, are in fact legalized trafficking of children. And I use air quotes for those who are not watching, because I say legalized because it has the backing of the legal system and in many cases government institutions. But I think by all intents and purposes, people would probably consider it to be trafficking of children. We're going to get into that. And the second story we're going to cover is going to be about my latest article on the Summit of the Future. If you've been following my reporting the last few months, the Summit of the Future is something else you may have seen me talk about. And got a brand new article breakdown that we're going to be doing today, explaining why you should care about the Summit of the Future, which today is July 23rd. The Summit of the Future happens in New York City, September 21st to the 23rd, that weekend. And this is part of the United Nations 79th annual General Assembly meeting. But again, this is they're pumping it up. The Summit of the Future, they're going to sign something called the Pact of the Future. It's very likely the United Nations and the member states are going to declare a planetary emergency and give themselves more powers to push us further to world government. So we're going to break down all that. And then, of course, we'll be talking about a book that I'm reading in my segment, What's Derrick Reading, where I highlight some of my books from behind me. And then, of course, we're going to end with a music video from a conscious artist. So I'm excited to talk with you guys tonight, and thanks for everybody who is joining me. Before we go a little further though and get into our news stories, I want to tell you a couple of brief announcements. One being that some of you know I live in Mexico part of the year, and specifically in central Mexico, Morelia, Mexico, and that in 2020, fall of 2020, as we started to see COVID-19 84 rising, I announced that we were going, me and my partner Miriam, we're going to start an intentional community, an eco-village in Mexico. We didn't know where at exactly. We just made the announcement and said, hey, if you're interested, reach out to us. We had about 400, 500 people from around the world reach out. We put together an application. We sent it to everybody. We got a few hundred responses. We narrowed that down to 50 people. And then from November 2020 till now, we started having these meetings. And as of last year, 2023, we found the property, we decided on it. We announced this in January 2023. We did some crowdfunding. Thanks to many of you out there donating, investing. We raised $25,000 plus we put in some of our own money, and we were able to purchase this property in central Mexico, outside of Morelia, which is where I'm at right now, up in the mountains, and it's very beautiful. In fact, I'll show you a picture of it in just a moment. But the announcement is that we are now looking for new members who want to join us. And before I tell you more, I'm going to just play you a quick video that Miriam and I put together explaining what we're looking for, and I'll show you the website, and then we'll move on. So check this out. Hey everyone, it's Derrick.
And it's Miriam.
And we are super excited to share some new information about our eco-village project, the Conscious Agora. First of all, we just want to say thank you to everybody who has contributed. You may remember that back in 2023, we launched a crowdfunding campaign. We raised about $24,000 from people all around the world. And that allowed us to get the land that we now have here in Morelia, outside of Morelia, Michoacan, Mexico. And now we're excited because, well,
we are opening it up for new applicants to potentially join our community.
So if you are interested, first of all, go to theconsciousagora.com. You can learn more about the basics of our project. It's a super simple website, but it'll get you straight to the point about our principles and our values. And if it sounds like something you're interested in, then I do encourage you to reach out to me. You can email me at derrick@theconsciousresistance.com, DERRICK @theconsciousresistance.com. Please put in the subject The Conscious Agora so I know what you're interested in.
You can also email us through the website as well.
Through the website as well. We're going to be sending this out far and wide, so lots of people are going to see it. And just to save everybody's time, we will just tell you a couple of things right off the bat that our community is looking for.
One of the things is that we realize that we want new community members to speak Spanish or be well working on their Spanish.
So we're looking for couples, families. We will consider individuals, but we're definitely looking more towards couples and families who have, as Miriam said, a fluency in Spanish or intermediate level. We just want to make sure that, again, part of our community, our core principle is to be integrated into the local community. So we want more Spanish speakers. We're also looking for people who are ready to move in and to get involved ASAP.
Another thing is that we are looking for members who are looking to be either full-time or more than half of the year full-time on the land and ready to be living there and working there.
And the final thing is we are looking for people who have financial resources. We want skill sets, of course, and we've got some talented people already in our groups, but we definitely are looking for people who have financial resources, who are ready to purchase and buy into the project and to build their homes on the property. Again, you can learn so much more details if you reach out to us or visit the website, but just to reiterate, looking for Spanish speakers, looking for people who are ready to move in soon, like now rather than later, looking to be full-time, and those who have financial resources to participate in the building of this project. Thank you guys again for the support in the past, and I hope all of you around the world are pursuing your own exit and build journey. And if you think you want to pursue living in Mexico and consider our project, reach out to us.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, talk to you soon. Until next time, remember,
you're beautiful.
You are powerful.
And
you are free.
I'm going to go enjoy this papaya
salad.
Bye.
So the website is theconsciousagora.com. Check it out. Like I said, super basic website, but it'll tell you more about it. And for those of you who've been following my work for years, you know that I wrote about this back in 2016 in my book, Manifesto of the Free Humans, which was republished in 2020 in the Conscious Resistance Trilogy. So you can go there. You can also just go to the website, and we do have a link on the website about our value, our principles and our values, and you can actually click where's that right here and read a PDF version of those 3 chapters from my book that focus on the creation of the Conscious Agora: sovereignty, the individual, mindfulness, permaculture. Those are key to what we're doing. And there's a few older pictures here that you can check out from the land, including this one of the donkey here and some of our avocado trees. We went this weekend actually and camped, and there are peaches growing still, bananas growing, avocados, pomegranate, and it's the rainy season, so there's still stuff growing. But yeah, check it out if you guys are interested. And again, theconsciousagora.com. So let's move forward. One other announcement before we get into the news. I'm going to be in Nashville, Tennessee this weekend. I'm going to flying to Nashville tomorrow from Mexico, and I'll be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, coming home Sunday. And that is for the Bitcoin Nashville Conference. Now, for those of you who know my work, I've been involved in the Bitcoin space, reporting on it, trying to understand it since 2012. And started receiving Bitcoin transactions back then, started going to the Texas Bitcoin Conference and other events and interviewing people, again, trying to understand it. And I'm one of those people who've been around long enough to remember when Bitcoin and crypto was specifically about trying to avoid the government and avoid taxes and to get past the fiat central banking system. Unfortunately, in the last few years, most people know about the crypto Bitcoin space specifically as what people call number go up, which is just a dumb way to say, oh, that's all you care about. You want the number to go up. You want it to be worth more in US dollars, when the whole original goal was to not even use US dollars or francs or euros or pounds or pesos, but instead to have a non-state currency where people can transact without needing banks and government. Unfortunately, the space has largely been co-opted by people who are just promoting it as an investment, a way to get rich, and oh, we don't need to use it as an actual currency. I could go on and on. But nevertheless, I'm going here. I will be there as media with Ryan Christian of The Last American Vagabond as well, and my buddy Hakeem Anwar from the Above Phone. All 3 of us are going to be there. should be a good time. And specifically, we're going to, as you can see there, Donald Trump's going to be there. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be there. Russell Brand's going to be there. Michael Saylor's going to be there. Edward Snowden's going to be streaming in, doing a talk. Trump will be there. And as usual, wherever Trump goes, it's going to be a circus. Some of you may remember back in May, I went to the Libertarian National Convention. Trump was there. RFK was there as well. I also questioned RFK at the Consensus Crypto Conference in Austin about Zionism. I'm planning to do more interviews. Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be there. I do plan to try to interview Russell Brand and ask him about some things. We'll see if there's a chance to even get close to Trump after recent events. And RFK Jr. and some other folks who I think are responsible for totally changing the perception of Bitcoin, like I was saying, and taking it from being a non-state currency to being something that people just think is a fun investment to add to their portfolio. And there will be some talks based on privacy. There will be some actual interesting things. A lot of it is just going to be, in my opinion, garbage, kind of promoting crypto and Bitcoin without any eye towards it actually being a revolutionary, evolutionary alternative to the state. And instead just like, yay, let's celebrate Bitcoin because we're all getting rich, while we're supporting people like Jamie Dimon and Larry Fink from BlackRock, who are now coming into the space and saying, oh, Bitcoin is so great. And really what we're witnessing is a co-opting, a shifting from the mindset, taking Bitcoin away from this kind of, and other cryptos. Like I prefer Monero because it's actually private, away from this original vision of a non-state digital cash that can be used by people. And instead they're like, no, just hold it. It's just digital gold. I could go on. But my point is, in case anybody's there in Nashville, you want to meet up, if you're going to be at this conference, hit me up. I'll be there for the next few days, hanging out with Ryan Christian and Hakeem Anwar of the Above Fund. So, all right. Again, thank you guys for being here tonight. We're about to dive into our stories. Let's check some comments real quick. Okay, there's people arguing in the comments. Let's ignore that for now and let's continue on. All right, we're going to talk about my first story of the night, which relates to my ongoing investigation into Bethany Christian Services and the ongoing look at adoption and industry in general. Now, I've talked about this recently, that there seems to be many people who, I think, unfortunately, mistakenly buy into the idea that the adoption industry is everything that we have been told it is, that it is just the best, that if you're taking children from drug addict parents and giving them to families who can't have children and everybody's happy on both ends, or a parent who just for whatever reason decides to give up their child, they make that choice consciously of their own volition with no manipulation, and then they give up their child and they're able to, keep in touch with the child as the child is raised by other people and everybody's happy. Yes, those situations do exist. They do happen. I won't deny that. But by and large, what I'm finding, what my research has shown, especially if you've followed my 2 previous articles and video breakdowns and my interview with Catherine Joyce, author of the book, The Child Catchers, is that this is not always the case. And in fact, it might be rare to say that adoption works out for the positive, and that in fact, most of the time, there is coercion, there is elements of lying, of fraudulent behavior, and as I mentioned earlier, potentially of trafficking children. So we're going to get into that. Let's go ahead and dive into this latest article. This one is, again, at thelastamericanvagabond.com. I titled it, Meet the Organizations Exposing the Truth About Adoption and Supporting Families in Need. And now the reason this one, as I might have mentioned to you last week, this article is a bit more focused on, yes, we're going to talk about the problems because we have to address the problems. But what's exciting to me about this, because we want to talk about solutions when there's an opportunity, is that I was able to speak to 2 different women who are involved in the organization Saving Our Sisters, and another one called the Adoption, Truth, and Transparency Worldwide Information Network. I think I got that right. We'll find out in just a second. And both of them shared their stories, again, of being involved, dealing with the adoption industry. One as a parent who relinquished their rights and then later regretted it. The other one as an adoptee who later in life found out that their parents were lied to about their adoption and has since now gone on to help other people. So I always love when we can talk about solutions, because that's what we need more than anything. Mothers who have been mistreated by Bethany Christian Services and similar adoption firms are now organizing on social media and founding nonprofits to provide crucial education and support for parents considering adoption. As I mentioned, I talked to the author of the book, The Child Catchers, Rescue, Trafficking, and the New Gospel of Adoption. Her name is Catherine Joyce. She told me that she thinks the roots of the current problems with organizations like Bethany Christian Services can be traced back to World War II. And when she talked to me recently, she said that This area, this period in U.S. history is known as the baby scoop era following World War II. She said, quote, "This was an era of deeply secretive adoptions that usually resulted after women were sent away for some portion of their pregnancy to reside in a secretive maternity home where they were treated as though they had done something sinful. When they eventually had their babies were whisked away to adoptive homes, and they were sent home and told, 'You will forget this ever happened.'" And she says in these cases, some women would move on with their lives and they would have children later when they were married. And of course, post World War II, this sort of thing was extremely frowned upon. And so women were shamed. They were get out of here. Don't, you're a family secret. And then you'll come back when, from vacation without a baby. Catherine continues, "What happened instead is that so many of these women, and we're talking about millions of women in the U.S., had really profound, lifelong, extreme grief from the severing of the bond under what in many, many cases was at least coercive circumstances, and in some case, you could say outright forced circumstances. These women did not have a real choice about whether they were going to keep their baby." And so this is this baby scoop era where organizations like Bethany Christian Services were created and founded and start to come onto the scene. And as I previously reported, Bethany Christian Services, they have a history of support from the DeVos family, from the Trump administration, including former Secretary of Education under Donald Trump, Betsy DeVos. And this itself is emblematic of a larger issue, which I've since learned about, involving wealthy Christian philanthropists who donate to Bethany Christian Services and similar firms in the hopes that they will prevent abortions by promoting adoption. And again, I've tried to address this very delicately because I know some of you might have a reflexive response of like, well, adoption's better than abortion in all cases across the board, so I'm going to just support that regardless, because that is very much what this is being promoted as. You even got Supreme Court justices writing opinions and discussing the potential for adoptions to increase as they restrict abortion in many different ways. But unfortunately, my friends, an adoptee being adopted instead of being aborted does not guarantee them necessarily a better life and better quality of life. Bethany Christian Services also has a history of involvement in the U.S. government's separating of children under the Trump and Biden administrations. And I also reported on the history of lawsuits against Bethany Christian Services and how they've been accused by, parents have been accused of accusing Bethany Christian Services employees of lying to them or manipulating them in order to secure their adoptions. And in my second report, I actually spoke to 4 different families. 3 of them went on the record. Mothers who had direct experience with Bethany Christian Services and who felt that their lives were irreparably damaged and their relationships with their children as well. And each of them have different details about how old they are, what part of the country they came from, their backgrounds, but the outcomes are pretty much all identical. What the women told me was that they were promised what's known as an open adoption from Bethany Christian Services, and they chose to relinquish their rights for different reasons, but they said, okay, there'll be an open adoption, you'll get pictures of the child, you'll get letters, you'll get updates on their lives, you'll be a part of their life. But every single parent that I spoke to for my investigation said that those promises were not upheld and often were just completely ignored, or they were just outright lied to. And then as I ended my second piece, leading to where we're now, what we're about to cover, I discovered that just like there is a quote unquote conspiracy culture on the internet that many of us are a part of, you could say truthers, conspiracy realists, whatever you want to say, there is a very similar thing when it comes to adoption. I'm calling it the adoption truth. And this is social media accounts, websites, organizations like we're about to cover with Saving Our Sisters and the Adoption Truth Network, who are specifically focused on trying to expose these topics and get more people to be aware of the actual nature of adoption. And as I'm going to show you, and as I've reported already, many of these cases I think qualify as trafficking of children, but they have this veil of morality or people kind of falsely believing that there's something they're not because of all the positive stories that we've heard about adoption and what most of us are led to believe about it. But let's continue now looking at the organizations who are involved in and really trying to help and support families who are dealing with this unfortunate situations. Let's go ahead and check this one out real quick. So Saving Our Sisters, this is the first organization we're going to look at. Renee Gellin, she's one of the co-founders of the organization, and she told me she had been struggling to get out of debt in 2008, after her business collapsed, and she found out she was unexpectedly pregnant. And she panicked. She struggled, she said, to believe in herself and her ability to give her child the best possible life. And after spending months trying to work out a plan and to take care of her incoming child, she ultimately signed papers to relinquish her parental rights 72 hours after her son was born. And she said that, like the other women, she was promised an open adoption. She told me, quote, "It was a very, very rude awakening and extremely traumatic to learn all the things that happen in an infant adoption. I was not informed of my rights. I didn't have an attorney. I didn't know I should have an attorney. It's been a really rough road, and it really affected my family." And after dealing with the aftermath of this, she started to go to the internet like many of us do. She started joining forums and checking out, looking for other people who had similar experiences or had just somebody to connect with. And that is exactly what she found. She started finding blogs about parents and others who had dealt with similar situations, similar experiences. And she connected to a woman named Lisa Woolsey, who was another mother who was also struggling with the adoption of her daughter. And the two women realized that they had both been misled regarding what they consider, quote, unnecessary infant adoptions. And they decided that they wanted to help other mothers to potentially avoid these experiences. And this is what led the two women to create Saving Our Sisters, which is a nonprofit organization created explicitly for the purpose of educating mothers who are considering infant adoption. And they are part of a nationwide network that is focused on what they call family preservation. This is their website, savingoursistersadoption.org. It says, Saving Our Sisters is dedicated to supporting all members of expectant families considering adoption. We focus on ensuring families do not apply a permanent solution to a temporary situation. She told me, quote, "We just started reaching out and talking to people, and lo and behold, these pregnant moms started finding us, and we started having lots of success in connecting to the adoption community that's out there today." Since that time, they've now grown. She told me they have volunteers in all 50 U.S. states, and they call their volunteers Sisters on the Ground, which are a family preservation-focused individual, which will communicate with the mother and the family in need. So say a mom's like, "Look, I'm struggling right now financially. I don't want to go the abortion route. And I would like to keep my baby, but I'm not sure I can do it. I'm considering adoption. I found your organization. Can you tell me what I need to know?" And they will tell them the truth, the stories, the positive and the negative experiences, just the experiences as they are, the truth from these mothers and from these families. The Sisters on the Ground share knowledge, advice, and resources related to the adoption industry. And specifically, this includes facts that won't be shared to them by groups like Bethany Christian Services. And again, in my previous reports, I've shown how Bethany Christian Services and these organizations, they partner with hospitals so that if a mother is considering adoption or just mentions that she might not want her baby in some capacity, Bethany Christian Services swoops in and says, "Hey, here's our paperwork. Get to know who we are, and we got families ready to go." And then that coercion, that subtle persuasion, and sometimes outright coercion comes into play, and mothers often end up regretting dealing with these organizations. Renee told me that due to the grassroots nature of their organization, resources are limiting for tackling the false information promoted by these adoption firms, and that they're competing against an industry with significant financial resources and pre-existing relationships with many hospitals. She told me, quote, "It all comes down to money. Ye who has the most money has the most face time. They can get in front of people more. They have the ability to travel and to hold seminars." But her team continues to do this work. They focus on direct action and educating families about their options for preserving the actual biological families whenever possible, and just giving them more information about the short and long-term impact of adoption separation, including the trauma to infants when they experience maternal separation. And she told me, quote, "What breakdown happened that made the mom feel like giving her baby to a stranger was the right thing?" And then this is another important point from Renee. She told me something similar that I heard from Catherine Joyce in my interview with her. Again, Catherine Joyce is the author of the book, The Child Catchers. She told me that many times these women who choose to go down this route are sometimes just struggling with making their next bills. Like if they had a little bit of financial help or support from family, friends, whatever it may be, they would not choose to put their babies up for adoption. But many of these people are individuals who do not have strong support networks, and they, in my belief, are preyed upon by these organizations and then taken advantage of. But Catherine Joyce is reporting, and what Renee told me is that sometimes they're dealing with women that just need a few $100s to make ends meet, to pay this bill or to get through the next couple months, and then they would be able to keep their baby. But because they're not, they face this choice, I think a very difficult choice, a choice that they often regret, and they choose to give their children up. So Renee told me, quote, back in 2015, when we were starting, I helped moms with $500 to keep their child and navigate their crisis, get through having their baby, get through the maternity leave, and successfully parent their kid. So I think that's an important point too, is that sometimes, I mean, I'm as an anarchist, as a libertarian, as a voluntarist, I don't really advocate for government welfare. I'm not saying, kick everybody off welfare and throw them out in the streets immediately, but I do wish we have a world where those programs weren't necessary and we could take care of ourselves more. So I'm not necessarily saying like the mom should be provided money, a welfare program by the government or something like that. I'm just saying the reality of the situation is not what many of us have been told, that sometimes these are just tough times. And this is the crazy thing too. Any parent out there, I mean, I've seen friends and I've gone through my own childhood, and sometimes we didn't have a lot of extra money, but we made it. My parents, didn't choose to put me up for adoption or abort me, but there might have been times where money was tight and we had to go without certain things to make it through to the next paycheck or whatever, right? And just, it's so simple like that. Like a lot of people who choose to keep their babies end up struggling like that. But in these cases, these families, these mothers don't have the support systems. So that financial struggle becomes, I guess I'm going to give up my child for adoption. It's not what I want, but I feel like I'm backed into a corner. And then, of course, you add to that these coercive organizations, which are manipulating the women often, as my previous reporting shows. And it's just not a good situation. It's a bad situation. So and the other point that my brother over here in the comments is making is that this is actually a $1 billion industry around the world. The baby adoption, infant adoption industry, and then particularly as we're about to get into the Korean adoption industry, the fact of the matter is some people who want to adopt, they want an Asian baby. It's like a trendy type of thing. And so then that causes, of course, a desire, a demand for these babies, and somebody's going to fill it one way or the other. So I think it's very crazy, these types of situations. Let's continue on. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're covering my recent article for The Last American Vagabond, my third part in a series looking at the adoption industry and the truth of how these industries work. And now we're talking about the solutions, people who are actually working on this. So the next organization we're going to look at, let's talk about the woman behind the organizations. One of the women, her name is Janine Vance, and her twin sister, Jeanette. They were both adopted in 1972 from Seoul, South Korea to the U.S. And at 24 years old, after their adoptive mother passed away, her and her sister discovered that they were not U.S. citizens. They grew up their whole life just, not really knowing their history, being told that they were born in the U.S., that they were adopted, of course. And then in 2004, they traveled to Seoul, South Korea for the 50th anniversary gathering of overseas adoptees from Seoul. She told me, quote, there were about 450 Korean-born adoptees who traveled to Seoul to contemplate overseas adoption. And I think that's really interesting. It's the 50th anniversary, so 2004, so you're going back to 1954. What happened around that time? The Korean Wars, we're going to get into in a moment. And it was at this gathering that the twins discovered that there were Korean parents who were out there searching for their children. She said, quote, that came to us as a complete surprise because we had always been told that we were unwanted, that we were orphans, and that we were abandoned. That kind of triggered my investigation into how the children are obtained exactly. And the twins would soon discover that adoption agencies around the world have been caught claiming that children have been abandoned by their parents or that the birth parents have died. And as part of her investigation, she began to read the memoirs of the pioneers of the international adoption from South Korea. She said, quote, the pioneers were actually faith-based evangelicals who built the overseas child welfare system and actually have a huge impact and influence on the system, which has now exploded to overseas adoption all over the world. And so in 2011, the Vance twins started the Adoption, Truth, and Transparency Worldwide Information Network, which focuses on advocating for adoptees and providing resources for families who have experienced the trauma of adoptions. And through their website and their social media pages, Adoption Truth, they highlight the reality of the adoption industry, which most Americans are, and not even just Americans, but Koreans and people all around the world are painfully unaware of. And I think that's really a disturbing aspect of just the outright ignorance. Janine's told me that the Adoption Truth organization differs from other groups because they don't silence people who have had negative experiences with adoption. So this is one of the common things I've been told, is that if you, let's say you have dealt with adoption, you get approached by Bethany Christian Services, you choose to relinquish your rights, and you go to them because you're having trauma, you're having, just mental health issues dealing with the whole thing, and you were told they were going to be there, they were going to make therapy available to you, but it all ends up being bullshit. They totally just turn their backs on you. In fact, as I reported in part 2, some of the mothers were told, you can't say that. Don't tell the adoptee, the parents that took your baby, don't tell them you're miserable. Don't tell them you're depressed. They're not allowed to know that. And, they want to suppress the truth about this because this is $1 billion industry. So most of the other organizations that are adoption advocacy groups are people that don't want to hear the negative side of things. They're only there to, promote the positive aspects of it. And Janine was even telling me there's kind of this like twisted cycle, I guess, where in some cases the adoption agencies like expect the adoptees to come full circle and then adopt children themselves, which is sort of like a tacit endorsement of it. I mean, an outright endorsement of adoption by saying, yeah, I was adopted. Now I'm going to go adopt more babies myself because I know it's such a great thing. But that's not always the truth, of course. Janine said that these other groups put a priority, or that her group puts a priority on the voices of families who've been separated by adoption and adopted people as adults who want to talk about the truths relating to the adoption industry without being shamed. She told me, quote, the people who've been influenced by these adoption agencies, they have these knee-jerk reactions to us that we are anti-abortion, when really we are questioning the way that children are obtained for adoption. Anti-adoption. And so she's saying they're not anti-adoption, they're just questioning the way that children are obtained for adoption. Now, of course, Janine and her sister's story is related to the Korean adoption industry, and this takes us from my focus on Bethany Christian Services, which mainly operates in the US and a few other countries. Now we're starting to look more broadly about this, and I do believe I will have future articles in this series where we look at the adoption industry as it relates to Africa, to India, and then back here in the I'm not in the US, but back in the US, you can look at the adoption industry as it relates to Native American people, which is my ancestry, and Native American tribes and the reservation system. A lot of theft of children that took place in those communities as well. This is not an unusual situation we're describing. So Janine told me that she can trace the history of adoption back to the Catholic Church in Europe in 1618 and then in the Americas in 1850s. She says then in the 1950s, after the Korean War ended, the evangelicals and the missionaries began coming to Korea and started the demand for children. From there, this Korean model of adoption was seen as the standard model for overseas adoption. And she told me, quote, the reason why it has that reputation is because everything became legalized. They created adoption laws that made it legal to do what a lot of adoptees believe is child trafficking. So that standard becomes codified, and then from there, it's exported to South America, Africa, India, and other parts of the developing world. And in recent years, though, the Korean adoption industry is actually starting to hit the mainstream news, including a focus on the Holt adoption firm, which was responsible for the Vance twins adoptions. And I'll just open these up real quick. I found, numerous reports. Thankfully, this is getting more information out there. This is NPR via Associated Press in 2023, South Korean inquiry to look into more foreign adoptions with suspect origins. This is a video from Australian news, because there are Australian South Koreans, of course, that were adopted out. It says fake orphans and stolen babies, investigating South Korea's sham adoptions. Like, this is, you might not have heard about this, guys, but this is a growing problem. And in 2023, Janine and her sister sent a special request to the Korean government's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, asking it to end overseas adoption. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established in 2005 to investigate various atrocities in Korean history, including after the Korean War. And the women and other organizations, there's about a dozen or more organizations involved, are calling on the Korean government to finally end overseas adoption 70 years after the Korean War ended, and it says, quote, to refrain from ratifying the Hague Adoption Convention, which was created and monitored by the adoption lobby itself to legitimize child trafficking. And that sounds like something else to look into, the Hague Adoption Convention. They said that they sent their files to the commission to investigate their adoption, as well as hundreds of other Korean-born adoptees who were sent to the US and Europe. The document was supported by Saving Our Sisters, the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, Adoptees with Guatemalan Roots, the Family Preservation Project, Adoptees Rights Australia Incorporated, and dozens of other family preservation adoptee advocate organizations. and they're looking for more people to sign on. Janine and her sister also organized the Adoption-Trafficking Awareness Symposium, which brings together adoptees and advocates. And she said specifically they refuse to take money from big donors who are associated with the major adoption firms. They also run adoptionhistory.org, which she said is her effort to get the perspectives of adopted people out into the mainstream. And she says the website is focused on adding educational resources on the adoption crisis, which are devoid of faith-based industry and advertising campaigns and marketing ploys, which, quote, deceptively hail faith-based agencies as saviors and also proclaim that they speak for and work for God. And one thing that Janine told me that we'll end here with is she said, quote, one of the things I would ask for the public is don't vilify us or persecute us and say that we're anti-adoption. In the adoption world, that is equal to being anti-Jesus, anti-Christian, anti-religion. Really, what we're doing is we're on the side of families and natural human rights and reuniting communities. So that is my third article in my series about the adoption industry. It's titled Meet the Organizations, Exposing the Truth About Adoption and Supporting Families in Need. And I'll tell you guys this, if you go to thelastAmericanVagabond.com, you check on the browser, there's a tab that says TLAV team. You scroll down to my name, Derrick Broze, and now you'll see a landing page, Bethany Christian Services and the Adoption Industrial Complex is what we're calling this series. And that will link you to all three of these articles. And if you're listening to this later, the show notes are at theconsciousresistance.com. But yeah, you can go there on TLAV. I'll make sure to include this after we're done here. All three of my parts are there. You can read them. You can see them. You can also go to theconsciousresistance.com and find my video breakdowns of each of those articles. You can find my full interview with Renee of Saving Our Sisters, because obviously in that article, I just quoted a few pieces from there. But if you want to listen to the full interview, it's titled How Saving Our Sisters Supports Families Impacted by the Adoption Industry. That was just released yesterday. And then my interview with Janine, titled Exposing the Adoption Truth and Supporting Those in Need. Both of those can be found over at theconsciousresistance.com, and I'll be adding an adoption category to the website very soon so we can make it easier for you guys to find that. So what do you think about it? Is this, am I, barking up the wrong tree? Is there nothing to see here? Adoption's all good, and Derrick, you're just crazy. This is better than them being aborted. What are your thoughts? We're going to go to a quick break, and when I come back, we'll read some comments before we get into our second story of the night. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is The Conscious Resistance Live, and we'll be right back.
Are you using your phone, or is it using you? Rise above mass surveillance and discover a phone that protects your privacy and communications.
Above Phone does everything your old phone does, without tracking you, while giving you complete control over your phone and apps. We are better than big tech. It works with any cell service. No forced logins, no advertising or tracking. Download apps privately. Control your phone and its apps with secure hardware. Introducing Above Suite. Protects your internet traffic. Private email on any device. Video call with friends privately. Encrypted chat, calls, and internet phone. Protect your searches and get results. Don't worry if you're new. Every phone includes a free 45-minute live call. You also get free email and chat support, free guides, and video courses. We can take back our technology. We're here to help with tools and education. You have the power.
Rise above with Above Phone.
AbovePhone.com.
Welcome back to The Conscious Resistance Live. My name is Derrick Broze. We were just talking about Bethany Christian Services, and we're going to continue that dialogue. I want to say, if you're interested in the Above Phone, please do check out the link via my website, and it's listed in the description of the video wherever you're watching. If you actually want to focus on solutions and maybe get off big tech and stop supporting the big tech companies who made your phone, you can look into the Above Phone, AbovePhone.com. But check out the link to my website if you'd like to support me at the same time. Let's hit some of these comments real quick. All right, so we got stats on adoptees are terrible. More like to commit suicide, end up on hard drugs, and more likely to commit suicide, end up on hard drugs, and end up with psychological and emotional issues. Adoption in America is broken. We also got, they just care about the money. It's an enterprise. We also got Head Full of Acid says, this is straight up evil, preying on new mothers who are vulnerable and frightened in order to profit financially. And I agree with this. Saving Our Sisters is an amazing organization. They can use all the help they can get financially. Gracious Love says, thank you so much for your dedication to the truth. You're very welcome. I appreciate that. We get a question, how much does Bethany Christian Services profit per adoption? That would be nice to know. And we got a response. It varies. They're making a lot. Adoption is a $24+ billion industry in the U.S. alone. Babies can fetch up to $100,000 for a healthy baby. And we got Head Full of Acid shares a story. The birth of my first son was an amazing experience. Every moment with him is precious. He helped me understand that the only thing that matters is the time we spend on the earth with the ones we love. That is beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And both of these organizations are worth supporting. I absolutely agree with that. And finally, Bethany Christian Services seems to be a node in the trafficking network. I think that's pretty accurate. So, all right. Thank you guys for continuing. Well, one more here. This is an important one. Greg says, these Christian philanthropist organizations make me sick, as does the church in general. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, everyone. We're going to continue on with our next story focused on the Summit of the Future, which is taking place in New York City, September 21st to the 23rd, just 60 days away, and still way too many people are painfully unaware of this event and the potential for the United Nations to declare a planetary emergency, not to mention take some major steps to creating either a new organization, an international global governance organization, or to modifying the UN Charter to make it even stronger so they can push us closer to world government. Many people have been aware for months and made a big stink in the last year or so about the World Health Organization pandemic treaty, pandemic agreement, and people went to Geneva to protest, to rally, but there is very little noise being made at all about the Summit of the Future, if anybody knows. So I'm doing my part to kind of trumpet this issue, and I encourage you guys to share this with your friends and family so that more people are aware of this. Now, if you go to go to theconsciousresistance.com and you search Summit of the Future, you're going to find this article that I published back in April, which got a lot of traction, was translated to Spanish, and I'm very proud of it. If you want to get a primer, then you can go back and check that out. Today is based on my new article that's going to actually be published in the morning. It's not even published at The Last American Vagabond yet, so you're getting a sneak peek. Of course, if you're watching this or listening to this later, it's already at thelast-american-vagabond.com. But I wrote this article back in April titled The Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future Will Rapidly Expand the Technocratic Takeover. And if you don't know the term technocracy, you're not familiar with it, again, go to the website, search technocracy. Go to theconsciousresistance.com/how-to and download my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which gives you a history and background on the technocracy movement and also how it relates to our current world and what's coming soon. Let's look at the new article, though. And since it's not published, you're looking at the back end of the TLAV website. So I'm just going to show you guys this. Sorry, it's ugly, but I need to be able to read what I wrote today because it's pretty fresh. I titled it, The UN Will Sign the Pact of the Future in 60 Days. Here's why it mattered. And I'm just going to hit a few different key points and update you guys. This article, like I said, will be out tomorrow. In September, the United Nations 79th General Assembly will host the highly anticipated Summit of the Future, where nations are expected to sign the Pact of the Future, which represents a major step towards the creation of a one world government. And I know that's some crazy right-wing paranoia. Nobody's trying to work on a one world government, they tell us. But there sure do seem to be a lot of people talking about it while you're not paying attention. So the UN's meeting in New York City for their 79th General Assembly. This is an annual assembly. And as part of that, they're having this Summit of the Future. And again, they're going to sign something called the Pact for the Future. And they're also expected to declare a planetary emergency. This is all coming on discussions over the last few years, since at least 2022. You can go back to 2020 and find some of it as well, from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said that it is time to shift financial resources to rapidly complete the Agenda 2030 goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, which were set by the United Nations in 2015. In September 2021, the Secretary General released his report titled Our Common Agenda, which called for the acceleration of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the commitments contained in the United Nations 75th Declaration. Our Common Agenda also called for a Summit of the Future so they could, quote, forge a new global consensus on readying ourselves for a future that is rife with risks, but also opportunities. And they said that the Pact of the Future will be, quote, a world and international system that is better prepared to manage the challenges we face. Now, you're going to see that like usual, these technocrats, they want to keep us all in fear. And we've got, this term we've been hearing for multiple years now from the World Economic Forum, what they call a polycrisis. We're facing a polycrisis of rising climate disasters, economic turmoil, wars, pandemics, disease, things like that. And it's just getting so crazy that we can't have individual nation states deciding on how to respond and what steps to take. We need to have a multilateral global governance system, which is just another way to say world government. Instead of unilateral, one country acting, no, we need this multilateral system, which, hey, let's be honest, maybe that would be a good thing for us if we didn't have psychopaths running the world and managing the individual nation states or being puppets for the people who really manage the nation states. If that wasn't our reality, then sure, the idea of some peaceful global governance situation where we could, take humanity into the future and build a better planet like we all know is possible, that would be great. But you're not going to take the United States, China, Russia, and some of these authoritarian nations, which are increasingly authoritarian, throw them all into a blender and get out peaceful world government. I'm sorry, it's not going to work that way, my friends. That is not what's in the cards for us, at least not through the United Nations. This is likely to be another shift towards a world governed by unelected internationalist politicians. And as I said, the UN member states are likely to vote on radically altering the UN itself, what they're calling UN 2.0, and to change the very way that nation states make decisions about the planet. They've also recently announced that they have something called the Global Digital Compact, which they say is all about establishing an inclusive internet for multi-stakeholders. And they promise it's going to be open, free, secure, and human-centered. And it's going to help complete the Sustainable Development Goals. They've also talked about having an agreement for the future generations. They're making big moves. They're making big plans. And so while many of us are sitting there arguing on Twitter and debating on the internet or just trying to live our peaceful lives, because, the reality is most human beings are peaceful people who don't want to oppress other people. We just happen to have these psychopaths at the top, and then other well-intentioned people who do work in the UN and various nonprofits who think they're doing good work, who are being manipulated to further agendas which are not going to lead humanity to a life of liberty, privacy, individual happiness, community happiness, collective liberation. No, it's going to be more control under the philosophy of the technocrats. So as I say here, although that the Summit of the Future and the Pact of Future have begun to creep into the independent media space a little bit, the public at large is still completely unaware of this meeting and the implications of the agreements being discussed. Now, in this section, I wanted to point out one of the people who is talking about the Summit of the Future, and that is a man named Jeffrey Sachs, which you may be familiar with. Jeffrey Sachs was one of these guys who seemed to gain some support in the independent alternative community, research community during COVID 1984, because he was the chair of the Lancet, the medical journal, the Lancet's COVID-19 Commission between 2020 and 2022. And he used his position to question the source of the COVID-19 panic. He also testified in front of the US Congress in 2023 regarding the funding of gain-of-function research and the so-called lab leak theory. And he's also been interviewed on alternative media or mainstream alternative media, depending on your view, including Jimmy Dore and Russell Brand. This is, again, Jeffrey Sachs, who is quite academic, and he recently published an op-ed on the Summit of the Future. He's also been a longtime proponent of the United Nations and their Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, he is director for the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. And students out there will recognize the name Columbia University and will remember that Columbia University is actually the home of the original technocracy movement back in the 1930s. So is it a big surprise to see some professors at Columbia University promoting a technocratic vision of the world that we need to manage the planet for the good of everybody? That is basically the mindset of the technocrats from back in the day, that the people are too stupid to vote to know what's good for us. So we need to have a scientific dictatorship run by the scientific elite and the technological elite, micromanaging what they called the technate. That is what technocracy is about. Sachs is also the president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and he served as a special advisor to the UN Secretary General from 2001 to 2018, and also advised the previous UN Secretary General. So he's been quite involved in the UN in many different ways. So it's really no surprise that on June 21st, he wrote this piece calling for the Summit of the Future to essentially build a world government system. Of course, the word he uses is multilateralism, but again, the end goal is the same. It's the end of nation states, and it's the implementation of a world governing body with the power to affect national policies. And Jeffrey Sachs wrote, "The world's geopolitical system is not delivering what we want or need. Sustainable development is our declared goal, meaning economic prosperity, social justice, environmental sustainability, and peace. Yet our reality is continued poverty amidst plenty, widening inequalities, deepening environmental crises, and war." Sachs continued by claiming that the Summit of Future is focused on tackling a, quote, set of unprecedented challenges that can only be solved through global cooperation. And according to Sachs and the technocrats, again, the poly crisis, or multiple simultaneous crises happening at one time, cannot be solved by one country alone. In fact, he makes it perfectly clear that from his position within the UN, and just as a mouthpiece for this viewpoint, he's advocating for the UN to get more power to implement policies for the entire world. He says, quote, "On the goal of reforming the UN, the key is to give more power to UN institutions and to make them more representative," or at least he alleges. And maybe he really believes that you can make the UN more representative, but I don't know about you guys, but to me, taking it from being, I have a local government that I have to deal with on a city level, I have a state government I have to deal with at the state level, and then you got this federal government, and we all know the federal government is corrupt, but you're telling me that if there's an international body making decisions over my life that's based in Switzerland or something like that, somehow that's going to be more representative. Okay. Sachs also echoes previous calls for new financial instruments to fund this transformation of the world, including what he said would be a new system of international taxes on CO2 emissions, shipping, aviation, and financial transactions. So he's calling for lots of people to be taxed. Now, he might think it's just going to be the corporations and the big, the environmental polluters or whatever. But as we know, at the end of the day, these programs are the Green Agenda, Agenda 2030, is very much focused on us as individuals, on our habits, on our lives, and making it like we're the problem. Where have we heard that humanity is the problem? It's almost like this is a eugenicist agenda designed to reduce the population. Hold that thought. We'll get back to it in a moment. This goal of reforming the international system to fund the SDGs is actually, here, let me correct. I got a little typo here. This goal is actually of reforming the international financial system is actually similar to previous calls that I've reported on, including by the French government and by Gutierrez, who called for a new Bretton Woods moment, which Bretton Woods is the infamous 1944 international agreement that established the International Monetary Fund. And this is, of course, also the meeting where they adopted rules for governing monetary relations using the US dollar. So it's a major moment for the US and for the world system. They're saying we need a new Bretton Woods moment. There's also a UN document on the Summit of the Future titled, "What Would It Deliver?" which calls for a, quote, global financial system that works for all. And it says, "A transformed international financial architecture is fit for purpose, more inclusive, just, representative, effective, and resilient, responsible to the world today rather than as it looked following the Second World War. The architecture invests upfront in SDGs, climate action, and future generations." And this also, again, as I said, mirrors calls that were made in 2023 when there was a meeting that most of you never heard of called the Summit for a New Global Financing Pact, which took place in Paris, France, and it was led by French President Emmanuel Macron, and had 50 heads of state, including Joe Biden was there, German Chancellor, British Prime Minister, former British Prime Minister, Brazilian President, including representatives from the Open Society Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. And this whole thing, this Summit for a New Global Financing Pact, is also, again, about resetting the international financial system as part of the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, besides Jeffrey Sachs talking about this, I also think that one of the main advocates, at least in the United States, there are other organizations internationally that are promoting the Summit of the Future. This one is called the Stimson Center. You might not have heard about them, but the more I learn about them, the more interested I become. They describe themselves as a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization focused on analyzing issues relating to international peace. They focus on nuclear proliferation, water management, responses to humanitarian crises, including the claimed climate crisis. And they also advise the U.S. and international institutions. So they're not just a random think tank. They're actually advising governments. And when you start researching the Summit of the Future and the UN more generally, you're going to see the name, the Stimson Center, popped up. And they were founded in 1989 by an American, and they're named after an American lawyer and politician, Henry L. Stimson. He served as Secretary of War. Yes, there used to be a Secretary of War before they realized maybe we shouldn't tell people that we want to launch wars. We'll call it Secretary of Defense, the Defense Secretary. He served served as Secretary of War under U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1940, Secretary of War under President Taft, and Secretary of State under President Hoover. So was very much involved with government. And according to the National Park Service, Stimson, again, this is Henry L. Stimson, the politician, had, quote, direct control of the Manhattan Project, which was, of course, the U.S. government's covert effort to develop nuclear weapons. And I found that the Rockefeller Foundation and the Gates Foundation have both donated, given grants to the Stimson Center. The Rockefeller Foundation more recently, since 2020, the Gates Foundation all the way back in 2008. Not saying it's directly involved with their current agenda, but it's not that surprising because both the Rockefeller Foundation and the Gates Foundation are all about Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, so it's not surprising that they're donating to this organization. And the Stimson Center has been a consistent promoter of the Summit of the Future. They've been publishing opinion pieces, hosting virtual conferences, including just last week, they held an event called U.S. Perspectives and Priorities for the UN Summit of the Future. And this gets to a little bit more of the meat of the situation, my friends. At that event held by the Stimson Center, it was an in-person and virtual event, they had Michelle Sisson, who's the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for International Organization Affairs and a longtime diplomat with the UN, as well as another doctor who was the former Assistant Secretary of State holding that same position. And during this discussion, Michelle Sisson, who is, again, a U.S. government agent, U.S. UN diplomat, emphasized that the U.S. government's support for the Summit of the Future and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. She said, quote, "We also support the draft Pact of the Future's recognition of the importance of UN efforts towards developing protocols for an emergency platform in the event of further complex global shocks." Now, this is what is so important about the Summit of the Future, my friends. This call for an emergency platform and the declaration of a planetary emergency. I think this is probably the most potentially dangerous aspect of the Summit of the Future and the so-called Pact of the Future. Now, I previously reported that there was a zero draft version of this document. The Pact of the Future was released back in, I think, February, maybe March. And in that document, the United Nations is calling for an emergency platform that they say will be activated in the event of, quote, such a shock that it has an impact on multiple regions of the world and, according to the UN, requires a, quote, coherent, coordinated, and multidimensional response. And this draft document of the Pact for the Future also says that the emergency platform, they promise it's not going to be a standing institution or a body, and they promise that it'll fully respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity and the political independence of the states. Trust the UN if you want. However, they're not the only ones calling for this. You have groups like the Climate Governance Commission, which are also promoting this planetary emergency. And here's a few interesting facts on the Climate Governance Commission. It was convened originally by a woman named Maha Graf, who's a member of the Global Governance Forum, which has extensive connections to technocracy, to the technocratic state, including the Rockefeller Foundation. And the Rockefeller Foundation helped fund the work of the Climate Governance Commission. I'm like updating my article here in real time. Excuse me. I'm like noticing I left out some words. Oh gosh. The Climate Governance Commission was funded by the Rockefellers, and this makes perfect sense if you recall my reporting from 2023 when I wrote that the Rockefeller Foundation has made it clear that the climate agenda is their new focus. And of course, the Stimson Center is also a close collaborator with the Climate Governance Commission. So I need to map this out, but you've got the UN, you've got groups like the Climate Governance Commission, you got the Stimson Center, you got the Rockefeller Foundation, and each of them are kind of like in this feedback loop, feeding information, then publishing pieces, getting it out there, getting politicians to pay attention. So this is my piece back in 2023. Rockefeller Foundation's new focus on climate change signals the next phase of the Great Reset. And that is what I think we're seeing here. So in November 2023, right before the UN COP28, the Climate Governance Commission released a report titled Governing Our Planetary Emergency, and they continue to advocate for updating our ideas on governance, specifically the idea that we need to move beyond nation states. And under this document, again, Governing Our Planetary Emergency, under a section titled Near-Term International Governance Innovations, it says that, quote, "We urge the UN General Assembly at the 2024 Summit of the Future to declare a planetary emergency, recognizing that the triple planetary crisis poses a grave risk to global stability and security, among others, to be reinforced in similar statements by bodies and agencies of the UN." They also echo the call for the emergency platform, which I told you about is in the zero draft version of the Pact for the Future. And they recommend convening a, quote, planetary emergency platform to address rapidly accelerating consequences of climate change. Now, look, my friends, here's a little history, conspiracy history, or just eugenics history, if you will. If you go back and you do the research, you start looking into groups like the Club of Rome. What you're going to find out is that these organizations are actually the originators of this idea of declaring a planetary emergency and this so-called polycrisis. Recently, the Climate Governance Commission put out a report, again, November 2023, that they said the belief in a polycrisis is, quote, recognized in the work of the Club of Rome Planetary Emergency Project. Well, let's look at that. The Planetary Emergency Project was established in 2019 when the Club of Rome published something called the Planetary Emergency Plan. And then they had updated it 1 year later, August 2020, at the very beginning of COVID-19 84. The Club of Rome's emergency plan is described as, quote, a roadmap for governments and other stakeholders to shift our societies and economies to bring back balance between people, planet, and prosperity. And again, the Club of Rome calls for a planetary emergency. They say the plan should, quote, be founded on the urgent need to at least halve greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. These extreme calls for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, especially carbon, have led many researchers, including myself, to conclude that the guiding philosophy of the Club of Rome is actually a belief in eugenics masked by a faux environmental agenda. And I'm going to repeat some of the information I shared before. For those of you who are well versed in the Club of Rome, it'll be familiar. If not, this will be new to you. The Club of Rome was founded in 1968. And they actually played a major role in the development of the more well-known World Economic Forum. And on the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum, they actually looked back on their history and they detailed how much of a role the Club of Rome played. They note that at their 1973 meeting, they had Aurelio Pesci, he's an Italian industrialist, my Italian's not great, who founded the Club of Rome with Alexander King, and they presented a speech on his now infamous book, The Limits to Growth. Alexander King was also responsible for a follow-up report which was released in 1991 titled The First Global Revolution. And it's this report that has a section titled The Common Enemy of Humanity is Man. And this is what it says. And again, I'll preface this by saying the Club of Rome claims that this following quote is taken out of context and that they're not saying that we needed to conspire to make people convinced that humanity is the problem, but rather that they're just observing humanity is its own worst enemy. I'll let you decide. Again, the section is titled The Common Enemy of Humanity is Man from 1991 by the Club of Rome. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which demands the solidarity of all peoples. But in designating them as the enemy, we fall into the trap about which we have already warned, namely mistaking symptoms for causes. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. What do you guys think? I mean, it sounds pretty clear. They're saying, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, threat of global warming, would fit the bill. That sounds pretty plain to me, but you guys decide. So now let's wrap this up. What comes after the Summit of the Future? I'm not saying that on September 21st, this is all of a sudden we're going to end up in world government and the world's over or anything like that. I'm not spreading that fear porn, that doomsday porn. But this is absolutely a major step towards the creation of a world government. It will be one of many steps to come. In fact, in the recent, some of my recent investigations, I'm finding that the UN's already talking about 2025 meetings in 2026, because this is all building towards 2030. Remember that back in 2020, the United Nations and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation declared that this is the decade of transformation. They are trying to transform the world for this net zero agenda, for the carbon credits, and for all the things that we know, the technocratic state. And they're going to use fake pandemics or exaggerated pandemics or war or crises or whatever they want, including climate change, to implement that agenda. Carbon credits, for example, you go back and study the original technocracy movement, they talked about having energy credits and energy rations, but at that time, they didn't have the technology to implement this. Guess what we have now? Artificial intelligence, digital technology infrastructure. This can make the technocratic plan come to life. This is why we must resist it. This is why we must opt out. Now, I'm going to read to you guys the final part of the article. For those who know my writing style, I stick to the facts, but then if you make it all the way to the end, I try to make it a little bit more a little more optimistic or inspiring. So this is what I wrote. One thing is clear, the Summit of the Future, the Pact for the Future, and the declaration of a planetary emergency needs more attention, and fast. Otherwise, the free-thinking people of the world will be in the same position that we have often found ourselves, looking back to the past with the benefit of hindsight, wishing that we had paid attention before it was too late to stop the advancement of the technocratic state. If we want to meaningfully challenge the Stimson Center, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Gates Foundation, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the many other tentacles of this shadow government octopus, first, we must spread this knowledge as far and wide as possible, as quickly as we can. That means share this video, share my article when it comes out tomorrow, go to my website, go to TLAV, find my previous reporting, share it with your friends and family, do your own content, do your own video breakdowns about it. With less than 60 days until the UN Summit of the Future and a potential declaration of a planetary emergency, we must do what we can to educate the public about this meeting and the danger that it poses to national sovereignty and thus individual sovereignty. And beyond educating the masses, we must also prepare for the potential that the Great Reset, Agenda 2030, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution proposed by the UN and the WEF cabal will become a reality in some form or another. This is not to say that we ought to give up and cede our liberties to the technocrats. Rather, we should recognize that electoral politics and voting for presidential puppets will not lead to liberty in our lifetime or for future generations. Instead, we ought to put our energy into the creation of alternative, parallel systems which can compete with the technocratic state directly. And this is why I'm helping produce the People's Reset UK, our summit for the future, our summit for our future, which some of you may have heard me talking about recently. In fact, I was on Neil Oliver's show, Scottish broadcaster recently. Dan Aston Gregory, who I'm working with this, was on James Corbett's show this last week. We're getting the word out. And this summit for our future, the People's Reset, is happening the week after the UN's Summit for Our Future. So their summit is happening in New York City. The week after, we're meeting in Bath, UK, in person. If you can come, check it out. If not, it's going to be streamed for free online all over the world, like all of our events. And this is 3 days, 24 presenters focusing on solutions for creating parallel systems in the area of health, finance, education, digital technology, community building. There's a lot of different areas we're going to take that. And together, if we do that, if we focus our energy on these parallel alternative systems, I believe we actually can create a better world. But I don't think it's going to come. In fact, I know it's not going to come if we keep banging our head against the wall and playing the same old slave games and thinking that somehow we're going to beat these people through the political system, even though they created this very system to be corrupted in this exact way. So that is what the Summit of the Future is, my friends, and I encourage you to learn more about it. That article will be published at thelastamericanvagabond.com by tomorrow morning. For those of you who are seeing this later, it's probably up. And I'll just show you a couple other things on screen. These are things from the UN website that I pulled up. Press release, ahead of the Summit of the Future, countries commit to accelerate their delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals. The high-level political forum, this just happened recently in New York. This, like I said, they just keep having more and more meetings. These people are so organized while we're sitting here arguing on the internet, trying to figure out who's a shill and who's a controlled opposition. These people put their differences aside and they work, they coordinate, they get shit done. This is another one on the Summit of the Future. Like I said, they're working on something called the Declaration on Future Generations. I'm going to be paying attention to this because, knowing these people, it's probably not good. And they've also got this one, the Global Digital Compact. They've also released the zero draft of that as well. So that is some more of what the heck is going on there with the crazy UN folks. And that is my report on the Summit of the Future. As I said, I really encourage you to check out the articles, to check out my previous videos I've done on this, to check out my interviews I've done with Jakob Nordengrad, who's from Sweden. He's one of the few other researchers working on this. I'll be interviewing him this coming week. And we're going to continue to try to expose this. I mean, I feel like this is what I have to dedicate my time to. We're 60 days away from the Summit of the Future. Some of us are even talking about trying to organize a counter protest or a counter rally during the Summit of the Future in New York City. I might fly out there. If any of you are interested in being involved in that, I don't think protesting alone is going to stop things. That's why the next weekend I'll be in Bath talking about parallel systems and building alternatives. But it is absolutely important that we get out there, that we hold a sign sometimes, that we go out and pass out flyers and talk to people and let people even know that these issues are going on and that the UN doesn't actually represent our values and our beliefs. And that ultimately the system that they are creating is not going to be one that leads to long-term liberty, long-term privacy for us or for future generations. So If we want to stop it, we need to educate people. We need to focus on getting out of their systems before it's too late. Because like I said, if the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset does happen, if we are not able of completely turning the tide and preventing it, then you want to make sure you're not stuck in their banking systems, or you're not stuck on digital identification systems. You're not stuck with facial recognition systems. You're not continuing to use big tech platforms, which are going to spy on you and steal all your data and things like that. There are things you can do. And this is what I talk about, again, in my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. Download it for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. There's a free audiobook. It's available in Spanish, German, French, and of course, English and Korean very soon, Japanese as well, coming soon. I wrote this before COVID, and I updated it with 5 new chapters after COVID, sharing everything I've learned, how I live my life without banks, how I don't have relationships with certain government agencies, and how I try to live free. I'm not saying I've achieved it all the way. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy. But if we care about our future privacy and liberty, and more importantly, we care about the coming generations, then we need to make some hard decisions. And that might involve changing your lifestyle, changing your habits, changing where you live, changing your relationships to make sure you are living in line with your values and principles. Otherwise, my friends, as I continuously am harping on, you can be awake and still get marched right into the technocratic state, right into the FEMA camp. It's not enough to be awake anymore. We have to be activated. We have to be actively working on liberating ourselves from these systems. And as I mentioned, I am organizing the People's Reset. So this is a perfect time to take a quick break. I'm going to play you guys the brand new, we haven't even released this yet, 2-minute trailer describing the People's Reset. This will be posted on all the Conscious Resistance channels everywhere, and you can learn more. So we'll play that real quick. Another quick promo break, and then we'll come back and we're going to talk about what I'm reading, what's on my bookshelf this week, which is this book. I'll tell you about it in a moment, and then we're going to wrap things up with a music video. So stay tuned. This is the trailer for the People's Reset UK, happening September 27th to the 29th in Bath, UK, and streaming for free online.
This is a solutions event. This is what's happening.
After 5 successful events in North America, the Freedom Cell Network is partnering with Free Humanity to bring the People's Reset to Bath, UK. In 2020, as the World Economic Forum announced the Great Reset Initiative, millions of people around the world began questioning the narratives being fed to them.
You must stay at home.
Millions of free-thinking people responded with protests, marches and rallies focused on waking up the rest of the world to the dark agenda of control and technocracy hidden beneath the so-called health initiatives.
We need to know every single piece of information.
We've lived that freedom message today. We've been a walking symbol of what it means to be free.
While the world was reacting to the rapid expansion of tyranny, the Freedom Cell Network sought to promote solutions by launching the Greater Reset Activation in January 2021, a 5-day gathering designed to inspire, motivate, and activate freedom lovers into action. The Greater Reset highlighted the importance of localization, decentralization, individual and collective liberty, bodily autonomy, and freedom of choice.
The technocrats at the United Nations and the World Economic Forum are now hosting the Summit of the Future in New York City in September 2024.
At that meeting, governments of the world are expected to sign the so-called Pact for the Future. We reject their vision and the assumption that they speak for humanity. Join us in September for the People's Reset UK, our summit for our future.
Over 3 days, we will gather in community, celebrating our victories and successes, whilst continuing to highlight solutions under 5 holistic themes.
Liberate your mind, body, and spirit.
Permaculture and food independence.
Building parallel networks.
Empowering technology.
And building free and conscious communities. 24 top-notch speakers, including Neil Oliver, Charles Dowding, Dan Aston Gregory, Nigel Howlett, John and Rebecca Bush, and many more.
We'll also be hosting the People's Reset concert featuring international artist Dub FX, as well as Presence, 33, and more talented performers to come. Join us in Bath in September 2024 as we collaborate and build the parallel systems of the future.
Join us for the next evolution of the Greater Reset.
Join us for the People's Reset UK. Visit thegreaterreset.org to learn more and to get your ticket today.
So that is the People's Reset UK. The website is either you can go to thegreaterreset.org or thepeoplesreset.org. and find out more. Again, in person, I highly encourage you. There's nothing like these experiences. I'm not saying this just because I organize this event. I've been organizing events on the local level and now on the international level for about 20 years. And people constantly tell us this is a life-changing experience, paradigm shifting. It's all solutions focused. None of the problems that you hear about on the internet all day. 5 holistic themes, as we said in the video: decentralized, grassroots, from the bottom up, not focused on the problems, but actually giving you practical solutions you can implement in your life. So I encourage you to check it out, thegreaterreset.org, thepeoplesreset.org, and you can learn more and come in person if you can. If not, watch it online, organize a watch party in your community, find a local cafe, open up your backyard, invite people, discuss permaculture, discuss getting off big tech, discuss growing your own food, discuss how to take care of your mind, body, and spirit. That's the real way, my friends. Not complaining online, not assuming that we're fucked because the World Economic Forum says we're going to own nothing and be miserable, but actually taking responsibility for your own lives and putting your lives in your hands. Now, I'd like to mention 1 or 2 things here before we get into our section, What's Derrick Reading? John Smith over here says, why use words from their word salad? He says, fuck the reset. We want to get back to good old decent values where common sense prevails. Communism always perverts nature. First of all, John, nothing we're advocating for at the People's Reset is communism in any way. And why do I use the term? Well, because I think the world does need a reset. Not a top-down technocratic World Economic Forum UN reset, but look around the world, my friends. I'm not talking about the engineered climate crisis or the things that they exaggerate, but look at things like deforestation. Look at the fact that there's microplastics in male penises and testicles. Look at the fact that our soil is depleted. Look at the fact that all the various problems we know, that the world's infiltrated by intelligence agencies who engineer coups and who murder people and who, control the corporate media. Look at just general pollution and the human disregard for each other and for the planet. Yes, there's a lot of beautiful things about human beings and this planet, but there are a lot of actions that are not working. So that's the one thing, and this is an important thing for people to understand because they get lost in this. Oh, somebody said sustainable. That must mean that they're an agent of the World Economic Forum, or somebody said they want social justice, or somebody said sustainable development. That must mean they're automatically a shill. And James Corbett has a great video on this saying something like, I'm a sustainable developer, globalist, this and that, and just explaining that independently, these terms aren't bad things. It's not a bad thing to want to live in a sustainable way. It's not a bad thing to care about the environment. It's not a bad thing to really, for any of these things. The problem is when governments or institutions, especially in the case of the UN, which are unelected bodies, come in and try to tell you what to do with your life, try to control you, try to pass a law to say you can only drive so much per week. You can't eat meat, only on every other Tuesday. You can only wash your clothes every few months. These are things that the World Economic Forum and UN talk about in their future world that may have to happen for them to achieve their goals. That's not what we're advocating. What I'm advocating as a voluntarist, as an individualist, as a freedom lover, is that the free, beautiful, powerful people of the world who are conscious enough to see that the world is not working currently. And it's not just about going back to good old decent values, because a lot of people weren't benefiting in the past. A lot of people at the good old days weren't doing too good, maybe people of color, women, etc. So how about we take the best of our world, we take our knowledge of individual liberty, we take the technology that we have, and we continue to respect bodily autonomy, freedom of choice, etc., decentralization, localization, and we build something better than what we've been handed. We don't just say, let's go back to the way it was, because that wasn't really that great anyways. And let's not say, okay, let's keep the technocrats in control, because we know that the same people who created the problems are now proposing themselves as the heroes and the saviors of the situation. So that is why we use the term reset. We were originally playing off of the Great Reset and saying we're the greater reset, or the People's Reset. But whether you like the name or not is irrelevant. The focus, the goal, the movement is all about solutions, empowering you. And I encourage you, John Smith and others, to actually watch to see what we're about. Or you can go to thegreaterreset.org, check out our Odyssey channel, where we've put all the videos out for free, personally edited by me, from all of our 5 previous events. That's over 180 hours of free content focused on solutions for getting off big tech, growing your own food, taking care of your mind, body, and spirit, building parallel systems, organizing your communities, helping the children. The information is out there for free. We have the largest repository in the world of solutions-focused content. We've also put out all the Spanish talks, the Spanish versions of our talks for the last 2 events, and I'm editing up the 3rd. So we are not in this for money. We're not in this for glory or fame. We're not shills. Myself and my partner Miriam and our team are working so hard on this event, and I really wish all of you could come in person. But at the very least, tune in online, and I promise you'll have a good time. Hopefully, you'll actually incorporate the skills into your life, and change your world. And then next year, you can come in person and tell us how you've been buying land and homeschooling your kids and learning to grow food, and you got off big tech, and you're making real changes. So you don't care about fake politicians anymore because you're in control of your own life. Or you can just keep complaining on the internet, keep doom scrolling, watching podcast after podcast telling you civil war is breaking out, the world's coming to an end. The choice is yours, my friends. You decide what you want for your life. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to What's Derrick Reading, where I highlight a book from my library. And this week we're looking at this book. It's called A Generation Divided. The full title is A Generation Divided, The New Left, The New Right, and the 1960s. And I am a student of history, not just American history. I just love history in general, but more specifically on student movements, and even more specifically, as somebody who studied the American libertarian movement quite extensively, I wanted to understand some of the origins of the libertarian movement, the modern American libertarian movement, which was started by people like Murray Rothbard, of course, Samuel Konkin, who's the founder of agorism and counter-economics, which is a big inspiration for my work and what I call exit and build. And this book, A Generation Divided, The New Left, The New Right, in the 1960s, it was published by the University of California Press. I'll just share with you what it says here on the back. It says, the 1960s was not just an era of civil rights, anti-war protest, women's liberation, hippies, marijuana, and rock festivals. The untold story of the 1960s is in fact about the new right. For young conservatives, the decade was about Barry Goldwater and Ayn Rand and the important war in the fight against communism and young Americans for freedom. And A Generation Divided, Rebecca Clatch examines the generation that came into political consciousness during the 1960s, telling the stories of both the new right and the new left, including the voices of women as well as men. The result is a riveting narrative of an extraordinary decade of how politics became central to the identities of a generation of people and how changes in the political landscape of the 1980s and 1990s affected this identity. Now, one drawback I will say about this book for anybody who might be more interested in the quote-unquote conspiratorial side of things, this does not get into anything like CIA funding of student movements or anything like that, which does exist. But just in pure historical terms, I even got like some old notes in here. I haven't looked at this in a while. I was taking a bunch of notes. Yeah, I have like a timeline here of student movements, 1959, 1965. And it's just really interesting to me because I see a lot of commonalities between what was going on in the 1960s, 60 years ago, to what's happening now. And it also makes me wonder, who's going to write the book like this, exploring not just the student movements, but the activist movements of our time, right? Who's going to write our history and talk about the conspiracy, truth or culture, and our efforts to wake up the world? I don't know, but I hope somebody in the future does write an amazing book like that about this. So A Generation Divided, if you're interested in American politics, history, really looking at the new left, yes, the counterculture of the left, but also the counterculture of the right, and then how that broke off and became the modern American libertarian movement. This is a super good book, and I highly encourage you to read it. It's been one of my favorites, and I'm probably going to read it again. And I actually want to show you one other thing, not a book I'm reading at the moment, but a couple of articles, areas of research that I'm looking at right now, and that is the CIA's involvement in the Mexico student movements. This article is coming from NACLA, reporting on the Americas since 1967, and it's from a Mexican journalist, Gonzalo Sotero, and it says October 2nd, the CIA in Mexico, both before and after the massacre of October 2nd, 1968, which was a student protest where students were killed, the CIA organized intelligence operations on university campuses across Mexico. And that's some of the pictures of the militarization after the student protests. And then that also picks up on this one. This is from 2017. The CIA's asset in Mexico was the architect of some of the worst atrocity of the Dirty War. Agency considered Spymaster Miguel Nazar Haro's brutal reign a period of stability that justified his ties to narcotics, the murder of a DEA agent, and even genocide. So there's a huge history here relating to the CIA, and obviously, why should we be surprised the CIA is down in Mexico? It's the closest nation on the border. They have interests over there, but it just shows you, and in fact, when you get deeper into it, some of these documents are still being released. It's still not made completely public. We're just now getting historical documents, CIA documents, some of which are tied to the Kennedy assassination, because you may have heard that Oswald was alleged to have gone to Mexico City, visited Mexico City. So because of that, people filed open records requests to find out about Mexico City. And then it sort of opened up this whole can of worms showing how much influence the CIA had. In fact, the CIA was funding, sometimes they would pay poor farmers to go pose as student protesters and rally and create a cause. They would brag in their secret documents that, okay, if we have $4,000, we can put up posters, we can put up signs, we can rally the people and get them to go protest for this thing. They also funded and worked with actual fascist groups and would pay these fascists to go beat up communists because they were mainly opposed to the rise of communism. And I mean, it's a whole crazy history. So if you want to learn more about that, I just encourage you to look up CIA in Mexico. You'll probably be able to pull that up. Not too difficult. But those are a couple of things that I'm reading this week, reading about the CIA, reading about Mexico, picking up my book about the generation divided, and looking into that. So I thank you guys for tuning in. We're about an hour and a half, so this is a good place for us to wrap it up. We are going to end the way we always do, and that is with a video from a conscious musician. But before we get to that, I just want to appeal to you one time to invest in my work, my friends. If you're watching this show and you've never donated to me over the 14 years that I've been doing this work, I don't even like to use the word donation because this is more of an investment. If you send me $5 a month through Buy Me a Coffee or Substack or whatever, that goes towards funding trips to go to Nashville to confront politicians and to confront Russell Brand and to ask hard questions to people like RFK Jr. Your financial contributions, your investments go to allowing me to do this on a full-time basis. The vast majority of my money doesn't come from you guys, though, although I'm thankful for the donations. I get paid a monthly salary to write articles for The Last American Vagabond, and I'm grateful for that. But 90% of the work I do is for free. I do not get paid to do all these interviews. I don't get paid to do this podcast. I don't get paid to track down documents and to do all the reporting. I haven't been paid to create the 14-part documentary series, The Pyramid of Power. I do it because I care about humanity and I care about waking up people. But I also appreciate the investments because that makes it easier for me to dedicate and to justify my time to do this. If I ever lose financial support, if I ever lose my job at TLAV, I might have to rethink my life path and say, you know what, even though I care about the state of the world, I can't do this anymore. I'm not surviving. Thankfully, I've been blessed enough to do this full time now for years. If you want to support me, you can go to theconsciousresistance.com/invest. My Buy Me a Coffee page is there. My Substack's there. I got a P.O. box if you want to send letters or send hate mail in the mail. I've also got my crypto addresses for those who do Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, or Monero. And that is my appeal. So thank you guys for listening and for tuning in. Let's get ready for the music video. This week, I'm going to be playing another music video from me. Last week the week before I played a brand new music video. I've got another one that just came out, and it's for my brand new song called Reset Your Mind /Berserk. And if you want to check out my website, 33ishere.com, this is the place to find out all about my alter ego, 33 underground hip hop artist. You can find my Spotify page, my YouTube channel, SoundCloud, my Telegram channel. I just released my brand new EP, Still Writing, a couple of weeks ago. And we just released the music video last week called Guard Your Heart. And then now this week, brand new song, brand new video, Reset Your Mind /Berserk. Check that all out at 33ishere.com. And I'll just tell you a couple things before we go straight to the song. Again, thank you for supporting me in everything that I do and for continuing to watch this show and tune in and let me know what you want me to focus on. I call myself 33 because I was 33 years old when I started rapping. I'm 39 now. It was also the year that I found out my birth father died of a drug overdose. I started having synchronicities where this number started popping up everywhere. I also realized and have heard that Christ ascended at the age of 33, that Buddha became enlightened at the age of 33, that we have 33 vertebrae. That number pops up quite a lot. Yes, there's a 33rd degree of Freemasons and other, but no, I don't think that these people have enough power over my life to own numbers and to own symbols. I don't give my power away in that way. I don't give it to them. For me, 33 is healing, it's growth, it's transformation. My music is about my struggle from addiction, depression, suicide attempts, and prison to transforming my life and changing my life. It's all about the positive message and what I do now. So thank you guys for giving me a little bit of time, and to the conspiracy theorists who are convinced that because I call myself 33 musically, I'm a part of the Freemasons, whatever. Continue on. Have a good day. So this song is called Reset Your Mind. I'll just share a little bit about it real quick and we'll just get to the damn song. So the lyrics is basically me talking about, I say walking through the door and it's time to get to work. I came to make some noise and show you what's berserk. So that's just like, in my mind, it's like, as soon as I arrive on the scene, I'm here to wake people up, to make some noise and show you what's berserk, what's crazy about the world, right? And then talking about abundance, talking about, haters are falling away. I also mentioned Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail. I mentioned Elon Musk's Neuralink. I talk about 5th generation warfare. And overall, it's a positive message. I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast and for listening. I'm trying to do my best to inspire, to motivate, to activate you so that we can make it through these tough times, my friends. There's going to be a lot more to come and a lot more chaos and struggle. I'll be here every week with you. You can reach me at Derrick@theconsciousresistance.com. Check out theconsciousagora.com if you're interested in joining our community. Check out thepeoplesreset.org if you want to come out and meet us in the UK. And follow me at theconsciousresistance.com. Till next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace, my friends.
Walking through the door, and it's time to get to work. I came to make some noise and show you what's berserk. All my people rising, yeah, we're rolling in abundance. All our haters failing, no coming back from this. Walking through the door, and it's time to get to work. I came to make some noise and show you what's berserk. All my people rising, yeah, we're rolling in abundance. All our haters failing, no coming back from this. I'm climbing to new heights, and I can't be stopped. You're coming with me, cause together we on top. We got the keys to the doors that they won't unlock. And we're freeing all the minds waiting for the truth to drop. Sever the main thing, cause that's the method of control. Smash the TV screens, but don't forget the internet trolls. 5th generation warfare to ensnare your mind. We're stronger than this, we can win, this is our time. Walking through the door, and it's time to get to work. I came to make some noise and show you what's berserk. All my people rising, yeah, we're rolling in abundance. All our haters failing, no coming back from this. Walking through the door, and it's time to get to work. I came to make some noise and show you what's berserk. All my people rising, yeah, we're rolling in abundance. All our haters failing, no coming back from this. Reset your mind and raise your vibration. We've had enough of this spiritual stagnation, and now we're dealing with inflation. One nation under blackmail, yeah, we're falling for temptation. All these politicians controlled by the desires, while they try to outfit our brains with hard wires. Neuralink, sever the link, we're on the brink. What do you think? Can we rise to new heights and take flight? Walking through the door, and it's time to get to work. I came to make some noise and show you what's berserk. All my people rising, yeah, we're rolling in abundance. All our haters failing, no coming back from this.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.